Is it time for school choice for all? Yeah, let's talk about that. Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to the Brian Nichols Show. Well, hey there, folks. Welcome to today's episode of the Brian Nichols Show. I am, as always, your humble host, joining you from our lovely Cardio Miracle Studios here in lovely, sunny Eastern Indiana. The Brian Nichols Show is powered by the best heart health supplement in the world, Cardio Miracle. If you want to learn more, scan the little QR code over my shoulder or stick around. We'll talk about that later in today's episode. But first of all, thank you to everyone for the well wishes post surgery. I had posted. Folks were like, "Hey, Brian, we were wondering what's going on in your world. You had posted something about a surgery. Everything okay?" Yes, everything's okay. No, I had a hernia repair, double hernia repair surgery. So definitely feeling a little sore. But hey, modern medicine, as much as we talk about, there's definitely some big issues with big pharma. They did an incredible job. Mesh, man, I'm part man, part machine now. And I get to do that fun thing where they say, "Do you have any metal in your body?" And I can say, "Yes, I do, actually." So that's fun. I'm going to end the medical talk and turn more towards what we teased at the beginning of today's episode, and that is the idea of school choice. And we've talked about school choice many a time here on the show. We've had folks like Corey DeAngelis, who I call the school choice evangelist. He's been on the show multiple times. We've had folks across the board talking from a policy prescription standpoint, what that looks like. But right now we're getting, hopefully, this idea of school choice being talked about from a federal perspective, or at least in a roundabout way, maybe giving parents more opportunity to take their hard-earned dollars that they spend in taxes that is then given back to them, not going directly to those educational institutions, but rather directly to those parents to vote with their dollars. So how would that look? And how, from a policy perspective, is that actually being talked about in any seriousness? Joining us here once again here on the Brian Nichols Show from, yes, every kid, is Andrew Clark. Andrew, welcome back to the Brian Nichols Show. How you been, buddy?
Great. You?
Oh, just peachy. Surgery. I was telling you, I got the snip, just not that snip. It was a hernia repair, which, I'm feeling pretty good. We're 2 days now of just having Tylenol. So all things considered, like, I'm moving pretty good. Obviously, I'm going to be down for the count for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks or so. But I mean, I have a conference I'm supposed to go to in a week or so, and I think I'm going to be good. I think I should be okay. But I'm going to hold my breath and not count my chickens before they hatch. But hey,
No painkillers, no Rick Perry moments on the horizon for you?
certainly hope not. But no, Andrew, it's great having you back on the show. Talk to us. Yes, every kid, you were on the show back probably. Oh, I hate I'm doing this, but like 6-7 months ago, back end of last year, and we were talking about the foundation. Yes, every kid. We've had you on the show, Matt Friendaway on the show. We've talked about all the great things you guys are doing, but just give us a quick Spark Notes overview. Who is Yes Every Kid, and what is the work that you guys focus on, specifically helping empowering parents and those kids when they're looking for different choices in their education selection as they're going out there looking for options in that marketplace.
Yeah, of course. Yes, Every Kid is an education advocacy organization. We care a lot about freedom. We think ultimately that parents and families are responsible for the education of their children, and that to the degree the government helps, it should be to empower people, not to take away the decisions from them. And so we work directly with lawmakers to try to change the laws and the policies in the country in order to empower families. In a
So
nutshell, that's what we do.
and Matt, like, this is something right now that is becoming more and more topical. I've been talking about this on another podcast I work in. It's called CX Without the BS, and we talk about, really, it's the contact center, business phone, customer experience, CX, world, and the different BS that we see in it. And one of the things I've been focusing on and leading with is this idea of the average consumer, right? We have gotten into this like subscription mentality, right? And I've been battling these big phone companies in the business phone space who they lead by default with these 36-month contracts. And I say, listen, folks, like month to month is the way to go because sure, you're taking short term risk because you're not locking down a 3-year contract. But what you're telling to the customer is that I don't need to lock you in for 3 years at the fear of these crazy early termination fees because I'm going to earn your business every single month by doing things the right way. And we see this in the way we engage in a lot of different areas in this subscription mentality. So I look at the education world and I kind of think we're in the same church, different pew mentality, right? Like parents should have the ability to say, hey, today I'm going to go ahead and have our subscription service to school A because they're doing a really good job. And then the moment they start dropping the ball, guess what? I have options, right? I can go to the marketplace. And that's not been the case for literally generations up to this point. So this is really the school choice conversation from a very high level macro perspective. But just talk to us now in terms of policy, right? And we've talked about this with Corey DeAngelis from the state perspective when he was going around basically the state capital, telling lawmakers why you need to be talking about this. But like right now, this has become a conversation from the federal government. So just help us understand what that looks like, and I guess what of substance will families expect to see when if this continues to move the direction it looks like it's going?
Yeah, let's go ahead and we've talked, I think, a lot about ESAs historically. We talk about those if you want. I think some of the things that are new or novel, there's two federal programs that are uh, different than what you've seen before. So one came in the big beautiful bill,
Mhm.
which is this federal tax credit, and the idea there is that anybody can donate up to $1,700 as an individual to a scholarship granting organization, which is just a nonprofit who gives scholarships to children to go to private schools. And so you as a taxpayer can donate the $700 to this organization, and then the organization can pool everybody's donations and can give out whatever the tuition amount is for the kid who's attending that school. And so that is going through rulemaking right now with the Treasury Department, and then it should kick off in the spring of 2027. And so theoretically, as long as a governor in a state says, yes, we want to use this program and the schools in my state can use the program, then the scholarship granting organizations in that state can start accepting the fund and distributing it to kids there. So that has the potential to be transformative in states that don't have an ESA yet. Just a governor through a pen could fundamentally alter that one. So there's a lot of potential in that program. And then the other change is 529 accounts, which people are probably familiar with as a college savings mechanism. But essentially, the federal government set this up quite a while ago where you can donate money for your kids' college scholarships and that money can grow tax free. They have doubled the amount of money that's in there from $10,000 to $20,000 a year that you can donate into a 529 account. And they've made it permissible for you to pay for K-12 tuition out of those 529 accounts as well. So there's now more expanded federal programs than there have ever been.
Well, and this is something.
If you're focused on long-term health but tired of overcomplicated wellness trends, you already know the frustration. Too many products promise miracles and deliver chaos. Cardio Miracle keeps it simple. It supports nitric oxide and blood flow, foundational elements of heart health, stamina, and overall performance. That means better energy, better workouts, and better recovery, without forcing your body into extremes. If you want health support that actually makes sense, and to get 15% off your order, visit cardiomiracle.com/TBNS to learn more.
The libertarian in me, right? Like I instinctually want to be like, oh no, more government having a voice in this stuff from a federal perspective. But what we're doing is we're more or less changing the way that the money is flowing, right? This isn't a matter of adding more programs, but rather just we're funneling the money in a different way. I'm gonna I'm gonna pick on my mother-in-law really quick because she used to have this thing where my father-in-law and I would pick on her where she would like have multiple different envelopes that she would map out and she'd put the money in these different envelopes because this was like, the envelope that she would spend on whatever, like the groceries, and then this one would be the money she's gonna spend on, the whatever it might be, I don't know. But she would bring all these envelopes and she would have all these different envelopes mapped out, and we're just like, it's all the same money, right? And she's like, no, I need to have my different envelopes. We're changing where the money's going instead of going into one envelope, which in this case was going directly to these schools. Now we're just saying the money is going to instead go to this envelope, the parents, which now they have their own envelope, and they're going to be able to dictate where money's going to go. And these policies are more or less facilitating that process. Did I summarize fairly?
I think it's a fair summary. I also think the libertarian in you should stay on guard because the government subsidies and government programs are fatally flawed, right? They have a long and storied track record of hurting people more than helping people. I think the argument in education is that education system is completely captured right
Yeah.
now. So you talked earlier about how customers should have some expectation of customer service, customer focus. You don't have any of that in public schools for the most part right now. So we've got to go from a system that's completely captured and completely run and unresponsive to customers. The bet here is if we can move to a system of subsidies, that at least you get some customer behaviors, some market dynamics that help improve people's lives there. But I wouldn't be confused about the fact that subsidies inflate costs. That's what subsidies do. And then having a middleman of the government is inevitably going to open it up for lobbyists to come in and try to corrupt the system to their own benefit. And so if we're not vigilant about it, these subsidies could be just as dangerous as the captured system. And so we've got to keep ourselves and everybody involved honest so that we can eventually get to the prosperous place we all want to go to over the long term.
Well, and this is the age old question, right? Like, what is the balance between us libertarians out there who want to see minimal government as much as possible, right? Because we want the solutions to be more marketplace driven. And that's a good thing. I think objectively it's a good thing, but there's also the fundamental reality that government will likely exist, right? That's just, I think, what is it? Life, death, and taxes, right? Like, we all are going to experience that in some place because at the end of the day, taxes are put down by the government, and there's always going to be some type of entity. Despite us going back to, I forget the guy's name years ago, we were talking about the idea of a GoFundMe government, right? And just like that idea of that would be great, right? Subscription-based government, GoFundMe government, you want it, great. It's there, the truest of public options, right? But alternatively, the majority of solutions are being offered by the marketplace. But in the reality where we all live, unfortunately, Andrew, that's not the case. And there will be a government, and then it comes down to, okay, well, who's going to be in charge of that government? And with that government, who is going to leverage it to do the most air quote good, right? And this is the slippery slope because as much as we might want to see government leverage, to your point, in this case, using subsidies in a very good way, that's also opening the door for our political foes on the left or elsewhere to use this exact same type of policy to subsidize things they like. And I mean, the reality, I think, again, is that that's going to happen regardless. So then this comes down to the question, and you kind of teased it, and I want to hear if you have an answer, is how do we play a check on this, right? Like, it's one thing to say, yeah, we got to keep an eye on it, hold it to an account, but like, we're going to see the left when they do get back into power at some point, be that 2026, 28, or 2030, which is crazy. We're thinking about 2030, but here we are. But like, that is right around the corner, right? And if and when they do come back into power and they start to, go push to the opposite end using these types of mechanisms, like, what do we do to hold them to an account? Is there is there anything we can do? And that's the scary part. I'm wondering, do you have an idea or do you have some solutions?
I always have lots of ideas. I can't promise any solutions, but we could try.
All right, let's see what we can do.
No, look, some of the problem with the way that we've approached education today and any of these government programs is that subsidies do create inflation. And so a few better examples of that than education, where the per student cost right now is about $20,000 across the country. There are school districts in upstate New York that are over $100,000 per kid per year.
And by
New
the
York
way,
City-
inflation for folks playing on the home game, it's too many dollars facing too few goods, or in this case, too few services, schools.
Yeah, exactly. And the layman way of thinking of it is things just get more expensive, right?
Right.
And that's where we're at is, $45,000 a year per kid in New York City is cost prohibitive. Even if it were private school tuition, it's cost prohibitive. But certainly more so when it's public schools. And so, compared to the rest of the industrialized world, they're at half of that rate or lower. So if we're going to get to a place where we're saying, okay, the current system is not only not working for people, it's not delivering the intended results, the customers are unsatisfied, they don't feel listened to, but also we're spending more than twice, oftentimes 3 or 4 times more than the rest of the industrialized world on a per kid basis. How do we get back out of that? Certainly, moving to a system of subsidies might be a helpful direction, but if the impulse is for people who have ESAs to say, we need the same amount of money as the public schools, well, that's just going to be more inflationary in the same way that higher education has been more inflationary. What we have to do is to get the kind of school choice crowd, the education reformers to say, no, getting lower cost and a better quality of service is actually the value proposition of a marketplace. And that's what we need to do. We need to offer people better access to education than they can get elsewhere at a much lower cost. And that should happen every year, right? As more innovative options come online, it should be driving quality up and cost down. And then we should be responding to that by having even more freedom and more dynamism. This is where the education reformers start to separate between the people who are just looking for more money and the people who are actually trying to empower, human progress. And hopefully we all want to stand on the side of human progress.
If you operate a multi-location business like restaurants, retail stores, grocery chains, or franchises, managing phones across locations should not be complicated. But for many operators, it is. Inconsistent systems, confusing bills, and vendors who disappear when problems show up. Level 365 simplifies business communications across every location with centralized control, reliable performance, and real human support. No long-term lock-ins, no surprise fees, just a phone system that scales without the headaches. Learn more at level365.com.
My bad. Sorry, I was on mute. I had a coughing fit, which when you have hernia surgery is painful, and I had a lot of 4-letter words that probably aren't good for the kids. But Andrew, I was gonna say, like, one of the things that I do think is important for parents as they're listening to this is to feel that there is some type of I call it an inherent like value prop of I can now choose my kid's education. Because that before, like, that was alien. It was like I live here. This is the school we go to. Like that was right. And now it's like, well, here's a value prop. You can now choose what that looks like. But then the other part is that not all education's not gonna be the same, right? Like it's there's no one size fits all cookie cutter approach to education. And I think this is one thing that as a buyer, we need to not only be open to is that education might look very different than what we grew up with or our parents grew up with, or this ideal version, like idealized version of what we think a good education looks like, right? And like actually kind of look at what different options could be out there. And by the way, as a parent, consult your kid, right? Like, no, don't just take them for what they say at their gospel, just like for anything else in life. Um, Elephants aren't birds. Different story for a different day. But like when you look at your kid, how they learn, I know when I was growing up, Andrew, I learned way different than like my sister. Just, I mean, she was 9 years younger than I, but still, like how she went through education and watching how she learned, it was like watching an alien learn to me. And that's something I think as well is like when you have this marketplace of education, you're going to have way different options now for kids to learn from in a way that they feel more comfortable with. The whole ethos of this show, right? Meet people where they're at. And in this case, for the kids to learn in a way that they're most comfortable with. We had Janaea Sizemore on the show. She's out in Las Vegas helping kids in more disadvantaged communities, more Black communities, more more crime-ridden communities. They're changing the way that these kids are now going to school and getting better scores in tests because they're rewarding them with access to really cool shoes, right? Which that is having a tangible success, which she can point to. But that's not something that if you went to, PSA 118 or PS 118, well, yeah, and Hey Arnold, PS 118, like if you went there, that's not going to be the average curriculum for that school, right? So to be able to incentivize what would they call these different back when the country was forming, and you had these different bastions of like laboratories of liberty, right? Where you could try these different things, see what works, and most importantly, what doesn't, right? Because then you can actually tailor a system that focuses more on what works, and to what you said earlier, Andrew, what leads to better results, better outcomes for kids.
Yeah. I mean, I said at the onset when you asked, like, what's you asked every kid about I said it's about giving parents the responsibility back to educate their kids. And this is one area where libertarians have traditionally struggled is we love the freedom. We often recoil at the responsibility part, but you can't have one without the other. Right. And like if you're going to go out and have children, that's a pretty significant responsibility. Your job is to listen to your kids, to understand what they need, to be able to operate in a complicated ecosystem of learning options and help your kid find the one that's best for them. And I know that people aren't used to that in a lot of cases, but that is not just your right, your responsibility. It's also your privilege and your opportunity, right? It's part of the way you show love to your children is to help prepare them for the world. And, we have thought for a long time because we've had this hyper centralized system that we could just focus on the one true way to learn something, the quality way to learn it. That's just not how it works. Every kid's a little bit of a special snowflake. Everybody's going to learn in different ways and unique ways. And most people aren't going to learn one way. They're going to learn from lots of different ways. And so I really like there's this parable of the pottery store where a professor is purported to have given two groups in a class different assignments. He told one half of the class, he said, your job is to only create one piece of pottery at the end of the year and to make it the best quality you can. And he said to the other half of the class, your job is to make the highest quantity of pottery that you can, just volume. That's what I'm going to reward you on. And then he let him go loose all semester. And then at the end of the semester, he came in, and obviously the people whose job it was to create the highest quantity also happened to create the best quality pottery as a result of having the most opportunities, right? There's something about that parable that is transmissible to all sorts of educational opportunities. The ability to try things in different ways, to try, fail, learn, pivot. As a parent, that can make you feel like you're doing it wrong, but that's actually part of adulthood. It's part of living, and it's part of learning.
I was thinking when you were talking about the difference of the quality versus quantity, like I had a sales director. Actually, he was the CEO of one of my old companies, but he was also like the head of our sales team because he himself was an A+ sales guy. And one of the slogans he had was "activity breeds results," right? And it goes to your point, the at bats. It's not just the at bats, it's what you learn with the at bats. Like one of the cool things that's going to be happening with these AI robots that we're going to be seeing, these autonomous robots, is that as one learns, it's going to teach everything else, right? So like it's going to collectively learn across multiple different AI robots. And like, yeah, that's scary, but that's also really cool. And that's something I think, we have to like almost as a society be open to like for us how to learn, right? Because it was very much these siloed approaches to knowledge, right? You would get your textbook, you would get your school, and you get your teachers, and like you kind of were in your little bubble. And then you had the internet, and the internet opened up like, oh, there's different ways of thinking and different ways of learning. And now I get to see what those look like. And now we're in the era of advanced internet, but also the advent of AI. And I think that's going to open the doors for not just to what we're talking about today, the different ways we can learn, but also the different the different stuff that we've considered to be just like status quo, like normal, right? That's going to, I think, be challenged because you're going to have now a larger group of folks. And I don't mean to, make this a whole political thing, but based on the current events, I think it's important to talk about. Like the reason I think we're seeing right now, as we're recording here today, we're like what, day 2 or 3, I think it is, of the Iran conflict. And like, I think there's a reason, Andrew, that the powers that be are doing that right now is because they acknowledge that the younger generation, be it good or bad, and that's not what we're talking about here, but the younger generation, by and large, is not buying the collective narrative that had been promoted for 70 plus years, really in this post World War II era, that Israel's our greatest ally, which, by the way, was accepted by and large by both parties and nonpartisan folks alike. That's completely flipped. I just saw a thing from The Blaze where, for the first time ever, a majority of Americans actually empathized more with the Palestinians than they did with the Israelis. And I think that's speaking to where, because there is no more one source of truth, right? And a lot of this, I think, was challenged because of what we all saw during COVID. It made people start to just ask questions about the general status quo. This is the truth, trademark truth. That's said by the experts. Again, trademark. Like, when COVID broke that original trust that we had in the public health sector, I think it opened up the areas for other folks to ask questions in other areas that were traditionally off limits, right? And this is why you have folks like Nick Fuentes, who, like, listen, I'll be completely transparent. His team reached out and they asked if Nick would want to come on the show, and I thought about it, and I'm like, "Listen, I'm not there yet." But I understand what Nick's voice is, and I don't necessarily. It's not that I don't want to have that conversation. It's that I have also, like, a big guy job, right? Like a big person job, and unfortunately, just having some of this dialogue is taboo in that space. I will tell you right now, I had a customer back when the Ukraine war started. I had a customer that I ended up winning because the vendor that they were working with was working with Russia in some way, right? And they ended up saying, "Nope, we are cutting all ties with any companies who do work with Russia." And we got the business because we had access to a vendor who didn't work with Russia. And it's like, that happens, right? And that's just the reality. And there are going to be companies that win and lose business because of those types of things that we think of more political, but it impacts real people. And I think this is also, by the way, Andrew, and I'll get off my soapbox here, but, like, this is why Trump had such attraction in 2024, because a lot of your average people saw him more as a representation of normality. And I think that's why there's also a big pushback right now, because a lot of folks feel that they're like, "Hey, you said that we weren't going to be, rewarding these big food companies, and now you're giving them a green light for glyphosate or glyphosate, glyphosate." Yeah, thank you. Like, you said that you were going to do, less wars and interventions, and now we're number 2 attack on Iran. Right? It's like a lot of folks who I think voted for Trump because they're like, "Dude, we just want some normality, and some seriousness." Like, this isn't what we signed up for. And I'm candidly one of those people. I'm not saying I regret my vote, 'cause I still objectively look at it versus Kamala and team. I'm like, bullet dodged. But, like, I think you can still call balls and strikes. And I think there's a lot of things that the Trump administration is doing right now that are politically unpopular because, as we talked about, the voting base, the folks of tomorrow, they aren't getting this information from that one source of truth, from the education, from the media, from colleges, right? There's alternatives. So, like, talk to us, Andrew, what you're seeing, and I'm curious where you think things are going to go the next 5, 10 years. Like, where is education heading? What trends are you seeing? And how can parents today get up to snuff on what's actually happening in this education revolution that's taking place?
Well, as somebody who tried prolifically to go to university many times and never finished, I've often said I tried never to let my education get in the way of my learning. And I say that somewhat flippantly, but I think it's the answer to your question in many ways, which is our society has envisioned education as though it's an institution. It's something you do for some time limited space. I'm going to learn from 12 until I'm 18, or I'm going to learn whatever in elementary school from the time I'm X to Y. But that's not what education is in our lives. In our lives, education is the process of learning and continually learning. And when you unbundle that from the institutions of education, what you find is people are capable of amazing things. And I often think of, like, Benjamin Franklin, who I believe personifies America better than any of the founding fathers, and perhaps is more responsible for more of the innovations we've had in America than any other. He didn't have any classical education to speak of, really. And I actually think it's to his benefit, because where everybody else has this mimesis, this desire to be tribal, Franklin was able to look at the world and just be endlessly curious. He wasn't told what learning was good or what learning was bad. All learning was good to him, and he was just a voracious learner. And that's how you end up creating public libraries and fires and insurance and electricity and all the things that Franklin becomes famous for, not to mention the Declaration of Independence and, his endless contributions. In the modern world, when you look at guys like Palmer Luckey or Elon Musk, like same thing. They break the mold from traditional education in a lot of ways. They're outliers, but but because they're outliers from the institutions, they're willing to challenge norms. They're willing to ask why not to dreams that seem too big or too ambitious. They just haven't been beaten down in the way many of the rest of us have been. And I think that's what you're going to see in the country is you're going to see more and more people who are breaking loose from what's expected, what's normed, and they're going to try different things and they're going to find it's immensely valuable. It's transformational for them, it's transformational for their families and their lives. It's going to help education and learning get reconnected to work, right? Like how are people going to adapt to the AI age? I don't know. You better figure out things that are valuable,
Well, and
right?
right there, before I let you finish, like, you are literally going where my next question was. I'm gonna let you continue and then answer this next question. Like, what does that look like? Because a lot of folks are on the fence. What do I invest my time in? Do I go into a more traditional education as we know it, or do I look at more trades or like something what I'm doing in the world of sales, right? Like, 'cause I still think that human intelligence is gonna be very important in that world. Because AI, while it will be able to recognize patterns and contextualize things like the warm and fuzzies just doesn't have it, right? So, like, there's gonna be things there where people will have just that inherent value. Where is that? What do you see? How do we face that AI world? What is valuable?
Yeah, that's where the world, the real world, if you will, the world that we all live in is going through Moore's law, right? Like technology is doubling year after year. It's just accelerating at this rapid pace, faster than most people can even talk about it, much less adapt to it. And
Yeah.
education's still very much struggling to innovate at anywhere near that spectrum. And so what we do to kids is kind of insane. We put them in this rigorous, read this, regurgitate it, and take a test on it until you're 18, and then at 18, we're going to drop you out in the real world, and I hope you can find a job in an apartment. And I wish you well. And then we complain and whine about how incapable these kids are because they can't buy their first house and they don't get married and they don't get their job and they're on welfare benefits and yada yada yada. All the stats are shocking and horrifying, but I don't think we should be surprised. Like we stunted their ability to make decisions until they were 18. We need to start pulling that way back. Kids are capable of making decisions. They're capable of learning what consequences are, and we need to take the reins off at an earlier and earlier age so that they can understand, okay, what can I do that is unique? What can I do that is valuable? What do I have skills in? What do I have passions in? And then what do other people want that I can produce and I can do? And if I can learn that at 14 or 15, that puts me way ahead of where anybody else is right now. But at the time you're 18 and walking into adulthood, you should be ready to contribute in society. And if you're not, that should tell us the institutions that are preparing you to do that ought to crumble. And I think that's where we're at right now is those institutions need to be overhauled or junked. And we need to get people back in touch with, again, what are my passions? What are my skills? How do I develop those? What will people find valuable? And if I can do that and I make my decisions as a student, I will not just learn hard skills, but I will learn a love of learning. I'll learn how to develop skills. And as the world turns faster and faster, that ability to learn on the fly, that's actually what kids need to know. And that's what we need to
Well,
get back.
and I'll end with my final thoughts here. And Andrew, it really comes down to this, right? Like, one of the most unappreciated skills that you can learn is critical thinking skills, right? And to be able to objectively look at a situation and say, what is the facts? What is the feelings, right? Kind of deduce logic, reason, but at the same point in time, understand that you're going to have your own biases, right? And that's okay. Like, acknowledge you're going to have your biases, but put those into the equation, right? And approach things with that very much that critical thinking perspective. That is something back when I was in college, it was actually required part of our freshman writing class. My school required all freshmen to take 2 terms back to back of freshman writing, and it was entirely first based on, like, your more academic writing, and then the second term was based on persuasive writing, and it was all with the goal of trying to encourage and incentivize how to not just regurgitate what you saw or you read, but apply important context to it and leverage those critical thinking skills to make logical deductions where things weren't just explicitly given to you. You are challenged. You were not given the answers, but rather you were given the tools to find the answers, right? And this is something like I've seen this in just like video games, for example. Back when I was a kid, I was one of those kids. I used to do the Halo parties, right? We would take the Xboxes and we would plug them all together, and we would, one of my old buddies, he had a church, that it was like a non-denominational church as grandpa built, and it was next door to his house. We would go over to the church and we would literally have Halo parties, and there'd be like, 7, 8 of us, and we'd just have a blast. And like we would do that type of environment and have fun doing that kind of stuff. But like you fast forward to where we are to today, and that's completely different, right? That world is gone. And I think back to what the value was beyond just like having to think of how to make things work, right? Like the Halo party, you'd get together, you'd put the system together, and then you'd have like, the like we'd have to figure out how to do something in the game together. There was no like tutorial that just mapped you through the entire game. It was like you had to work together as a team, and you did it in person. And you fast forward to today, it's like video games just give you like the little GPS arrow. It shows you where everything is. Everything is illuminated. Like click here. Like, do you remember like when we were kids, like Sega Genesis and stuff like that? You're going through and you're like, there's a secret item somewhere on this wall. It looks like nothing conspicuous, and you're just mashing the button A as you're hitting every single button trying to find it, right? Because that's just what it was. There was no easy button. And I guess, for me, I look at it, those challenges that when you're a kid and you're going through it and you're like, "Ah, man, where is the easy button?" Right? Those challenges actually prepare you for real life where there's no easy button, right? So you have to be prepared to how do you address that. And unfortunately, a lot of millennials that I grew up with in my generation, they are facing it right now because they were very much given kind of the blueprints. Gen Z likewise is experiencing this in many instances too, where they were just given, the instructions, given the manual. And when they're faced with circumstances that require critical thinking or require like objective reasoning or logical deduction, and to not lead with their emotions, but rather to try to like be objective and third party it almost in their own life, they can't do it. Like it is shocking to see that happen firsthand. But hey, that's my final thoughts, Andrew. Bring us home. What do you want the audience to take away from today's episode? And of course, yes, every kid, you guys are doing amazing work. We want folks to be able to support the work you guys are doing. So give us, the lowdown. Where can folks go ahead, learn more, support the org? The floor is yours.
No, thanks. As you're talking, I was having flashbacks to the map from Doom, which would cause me PTSD.
Okay,
But
pause. Did you have to do the whole thing where you'd be playing Dune and you'd have to like literally keep the Sega Genesis on because you didn't have a save point, and you'd have to like pause it and keep it on for a week at a time while you were doing a mission?
see, you were clearly richer than me. I had to run like wires from one computer to the other just to hang on, and thing would flicker on and off all the time. So you're miles ahead of where I was.
It would die. Don't worry, but I'll let you continue. Sorry.
No, I think everything you're saying is right. Like, everything you want in life's on the other side of hard. We've got to be able to communicate with each other as humans again. We have to be able to have freedom to make decisions and suffer consequences. We have to be able to sit in rooms and have uncomfortable conversations. It's more than getting rid of safe spaces. It's more than getting rid of cancel culture. It's about finding meaning and purpose and being comfortable with discomfort and learning how to learn. And all those things are only possible in an environment of freedom. And that's where we want to get to. That's what Yes Every Kid is all about. And so you can find us online at yeseverykid.com. You can search for us on X or any other platforms there. Feel free to email us, and we're always happy to interact and would love to have your help and support.
I must say, my favorite conversations that I've had when it comes around the topic of like school choice have really been some of the conversations I've had with you, with Matt, and the reason being because you guys it's one thing to talk about these issues, right? This is why I love Corey, right? It's another thing to go out and actually do something about it. And you guys are going out and doing something about it. We're not just talking, big picture, and we're not just talking about like, oh, this would be nice. You guys are out there giving parents, in this case, the folks who actually make a change, you're giving them the tools to do that, which that's pretty darn cool. And you do it for, yes, every kid. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and make sure we include all those links in the show notes. So folks, if you want to go ahead and learn more, make sure you click, if you're watching us on YouTube, click that little description button. It'll open up the drop down. All those links will be there, as well as the links for all of our amazing sponsors like Cardio Miracle, but also you can find my links for social media at B Nichols Liberty there as well. Andrew, do you have social media links that you usually share or not? I'm not. I forget.
Yeah. I'll send them to you. You can post them in the show notes, and anyone can come, say 4-letter words in my direction. I'm gladly accept their criticisms.
Just blame your hernia surgery you had, like I did. No, man, I'll tell you what. When I was on mute, I was like, oh yeah, it's probably for the best that we just missed that little bit there at the expense of if I had not had it muted and you'd heard the coughing and then the oh god, and yeah, the other 4-letter words. I'll tell you what though, like those doctors, man, they did a good job. They did. They do the modern medicine. They had me out in an hour. Like I was out of the OR and I'm out walking to my car an hour later, and I'm like, what? What? I was blown up like a balloon literally an hour ago, and I'm now driving home. Like, it is so bonkers when you think about it. And it's like, rewind, not even like 500 years ago, rewind 50 years ago, right? And how different things are, despite all the things we lambast here in the show for big pharma and stuff, man, there are some really cool things that modern medicine has yielded us, and living in the most modern and advanced time in the world. But different conversation for a different day. Andrew, I really appreciate you joining us here on the show. And folks, if you got some value, of course, do us a favor. Go ahead, give today's episode a share. When you do, make sure you tag again yours truly at B Nichols Liberty. Andrew's links will be there in the show notes, as well as, yes, every kid's. And folks, with that being said, if you again enjoyed today's episode, I would greatly appreciate it if you head over to your favorite platform and give us a rate and review, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music. 5 stars, and tell folks why you love the Brian Nichols Show. And of course, head down below into the comments. Let me know your thoughts on today's episode. Do you find yourself supporting school choice, or are you one of those old fuddy-duddies who believes that zip codes should determine education? Let the conversation continue down below. But with that being said, Brian Nichols signing off here on the Brian Nichols Show for Andrew Clark from Yes, Every Kid. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.